We're beginning Chapter 20, Orbital Transport and Missiles, links to Nazis, NATO, NASA, the NCI, National Cancer Institute, and AIDS, of emerging viruses, AIDS and Ebola, nature, accident, or intentional. 4 years preceding the end of the Cold War, the KGB gathered evidence that Russian officials ultimately reported suggesting an American origin of AIDS. Officials alleged that the AIDS virus had been a Pentagon invention, a germ unleashed for political purposes in Zaire. Comics, as shown in Figure 20.1, even satirized the allegation. In response, the CIA waged a counterintelligence campaign against all such foreign and domestic accounts of the origin of HIV. Fort Detrick Public Relations Director Norman Covert wrote that the Soviets spread their disinformation in an effort to diffuse blame for the deaths of nearly 80 persons near Sverdlovsk in 1979 due to accidental exposures to a biological weapon. That incident was deflected for more than a decade by disinformation programs emanating from the KGB, he wrote. Such disinformation programs included the charge that AIDS resulted from a cruel experiment at Fort Detrick which went awry. The U.S. Army spokesman further alleged that AIDS charge was disavowed in 1987 by the then Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev, who apologized to President Reagan for the accusation. Among the government's documents I discovered while visiting the Boston Public Library in search of the Rockefeller Commission report was a Moscow World Service radio broadcast alleging a Pentagon link to the development of AIDS. I realized that Covert was mistaken. Gorbachev had not laid the AIDS allegation to rest in 1987. In spring of 1988, a high-ranking Soviet press official, Boris Belitsky, offered the latest Soviet position regarding the Pentagon involvement in the creation of HIV. Here's Belitsky speaking. Several U.S. administration officials, such as USAI CIA Director Charles Wick, have accused the Soviet Union of having invented this theory for propaganda purposes. But actually, it was not the Soviet scientists at all who first came up with this theory. It was first reported in Western journals by Western scientists such as Dr. John Steele, a specialist on venereal disease at two big London hospitals, and one of the first scientists to point out the viral nature of AIDS. So the host then asked if there had been any new evidence to support Steele's contention. The official replied, Belitsky, just recently, a Soviet journalist in Algeria, Alexander Sukov, managed to interview a European physician in the Mautspa hospital there, who made some relevant disclosures on the subject. In the early 70s, the physician and immunologist was working for the West German Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. Corporation in Zaire. His laboratory had been given the assignment to cultivate viruses ordinarily affecting only animals, but constituting a potential danger to man. They were particularly interested in certain unknown virus isolated from the African green monkey, and capable of such rapid replication that they could completely destabilize the immune system. These viruses, however, were quite harmless for human beings, and the lab's assignment was to develop a mutant virus that would be a human killer. Host. Did they succeed? Belitsky. To a large extent, yes. But when they inoculated the inhabitants of several jungle villages with such a mutant virus on the pretext of giving shots against cholera, this did not produce the immediate results required of the lab. Now, it is well known that people infected with the AIDS virus can live for several years without developing the disease, but at the same time the result was summed up as a set up as proving the unsuitability of the virus as a biological warfare agent. Swept under the rug much? The lab was ordered to wind up the project and turn the results over to certain U.S. researchers who had been following this work with keen interest, to such an extent that some of the researchers believed that they were in reality working not for the West German Orbital Transport and Missiles Corporation, or LTD Corporation, but for the Pentagon. In fact, 2 U.S. assistants had been with the lab throughout the work on this project. Several years after the lab had turned over its findings to the Americans, back came the news of the first AIDS cases in San Francisco. The researcher believes that the Pentagon had tested the mutant virus on convicts in California. Interesting, I remarked to Jackie that evening during dinner when she inquired how my work was going. Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. alleged work in the early 1970s was essentially identical to work Gallo and his colleagues published at that time. What incentive could Belitsky have to make up such a story? Jackie asked. I can't imagine, I replied. It seemed to me he had more to lose than to gain by the report. By then, I realized, the Russians were looking for American aid to support perestroika. But I'd love to learn more about Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd., I added. A week later, my speaking schedule directed me to Bloomington, Illinois. Jackie, now beginning her last trimester, and Elena were traveling along in our motorhome heading to Florida by the way of Illinois. Arriving early, I had a couple of free days to search the Illinois State University Library for more information about Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. By good fortune, I quickly came across a couple of reports. One revealed the complete text of a secret contract between the government of Zaire and the little-known West German Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. Corporation. Published in the fall of 1977 in Race and Class, the Journal of the Institute of Race Relations and the Transnational Institute in London, the contract disclosed that 29,000 square miles of southeast Zaire had been leased to Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. by Mobutu. The agreement gave the company complete sovereignty and control over the area. The company was ostensibly in the business of developing cheap satellite launching missiles for private industry, but the application of its technology to military purposes forbidden by the West German government since World War II, was quickly apparent. I found several other articles appeared in African and European newspapers suggesting the link between Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. And the West German government, the CIA, and the South African government. Little, however, was confirmed. This led the information Dienst Zuidelijkes Afrika, German Information Services of South Africa, to conduct their own investigation. Soon thereafter, they published their shocking findings. We have traced Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. And its supporters back to those Nazi scientists who worked on the B-1 and B-2 rockets during World War II, and who later continue their activity in the United States, France, and Argentina. For example, Dr. Kurt H. Debus, at present chairman of the board of Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd., once worked at the Peenemünde V2 program and later, until 1975, worked as director of Cape Canaveral Space Program. Richard Gompertz, Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. Technical Director and U.S. citizen, once was a specialist on the V2 engines and later presided over NASA's Chrysler Space Division. Lutz Thilo Kaiser, Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. Founder and manager. When young, was quite close to the Nazi rocket industry, often called Diodu's young man, a reference to Ardmin Diodu, his mentor, who served as prominent SS officer and as Goring's special representative for a research program on storing uranium. While working for Orbital Transport Missiles Ltd., Kaiser also acted as a contact for the West German government, a special advisor to the Minister of Research and Technology on matters concerning Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. He was also on the ad hoc committee on the Apollo program transport systems, financing by the German federal government. According to its own definition, Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. Is a private company financed by private funds. Indeed, during the Lusaka press conference, Chancellor Helmut Schmidt insisted upon this. The government has no shares in Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd., nor does it have any other finger in that pie. The real facts are rather different. Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. Is chartered as a transcription company, which means that shareholdings are credited by the government. That is, Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. Is subsidized by the government. Kaiser's business group was given many strange government orders. For example, in 1976, its technology research group received D.M.D. 764,000 for scientific investigations of coal gas. A colonial treaty. The contract between Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. And the government of Zaire involving the unlimited use of nearly 30,000 square miles made Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. Sovereign over territories once inhabited by 76,000 people. Orbital Transport Missiles Ltd. Is authorized to conduct any excavation and construction it chooses, including airfields, energy plants, communication systems, and manufacturing plants. All movement of people into and within Orbital Transport Missiles Ltd.'s territory is only with the permission of Orbital Transport Missiles Ltd. The state of Zaire is obliged to keep everyone else out and away. The same applies to the airspace over the granted territory. Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. Is absolved from any responsibility for and damage caused by the construction or transport of missiles. Its people enjoy complete immunity from the laws of Zaire in its granted territory. These exclusive rights are granted until the year 2000. War preparations. The governments and the press in Angola, Tanzania, Zambia, and Mozambique have expressed worries about the development of offensive military weapons using Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. Missiles in Zaire, the Soviet Union, the German Democratic Republic, Yugoslavia, and Cuba have all denounced the Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. project as a means by which West Germany may circumvent the restrictions against certain weapons laid down in the 1954 Brussels Treaty. The London Evening Standard quoted U.S. military development and missiles forces on Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. territory to prohibit an invasion of South Africa. In March 1978, an article in Penthouse by Ted Zulk said, based on Secret Service sources, that Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. Was an extension of West Germany's arms companies, Dornier and Messerschmitt, developing and testing cruise missiles and middle-range rockets, and Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. territory. France and the U.S., the article said, were also participating in the group. Okay, I'm going to say the acronym now. OTRAG is Orbital Transport and Missiles Ltd. Remember it. I've said it enough, haven't I? Despite all this, the West German government continued to insist that OTRAG was a peaceful project. A question in Parliament by Representative Norbert Ganzo whether the federal government was able honestly to deny that OTRAG missiles are being used for military purposes. was given this false response. According to our own investigations, the missiles, still in a state of development, are not fit for military purposes. However, in an interview with the magazine Der Spiegel, OTRAG chief Lutz Kaiser admitted that, of course, everything could be used militarily. The history of OTRAG underlines the close contact between the company and the Ministry of Defense in Bonn. Chairman Debus was not named the Chairman Debus would not name the three high NASA officials who inspected and praised the OTRAG concept. A CIA agent told a British journalist that the Boeing company had provided OTRAG with cruise missiles technology. Another article about OTRAG published in New Scientist Farouk Hussein, a research student at the Department of War Studies, a King's College London reported that the private West German company had offered cut-price satellite launches from a private range in Zaire that is half the size of England to any country or commercial organization able to afford it. Hussein heartily criticized the earlier report by former New York Times correspondent Tad Zulk, published in Penthouse. Zulk alleged that West Germany, along with the United States, was supplying small arms to Zaire, having secret projects to develop nuclear weapons, and of hiding the funding for the Zaire project. Hussein, however, confirmed that OTRAG's initial research was sponsored by the West German government and carried out at Versuchsforschungs- und Versuchsanstalt für Luft- und Raumfahrt, the Federal Rocket Research Institute at Lepolthausen, near Stuttgart. This project was led by Eugene Sanger and Wolf Plitz, two wartime scientists from the Nazi rocket facility at Peenemünde. They were joined by a brilliant young engineer, Lutz Kaiser. Following Sanger's death in 1970, his widow helped Kaiser form a company which continued to work on the low-cost launcher at Lampochtshausen. Under government contracts worth £7 million. But by 1974, the West German government allegedly decided to devote its rocket research efforts solely in the direction of a joint European launcher, which was based on familiar missile technology. Kaiser, determined to continue with his project, formed OTRAG, but he continued to make use of the facilities at Lampochtshausen for rocket motor test burns. Kaiser recruited the former director of the V-2 program, Dr. Kurt Debus, who was also the director of the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral, Florida, until 1975. Under the terms of the UN Space Treaty, an individual or private company cannot place satellites in orbit without the sponsorship of a government. This problem was resolved in part by signing of an agreement between OTRAG and Zaire. The OTRAG agreement with Zaire, which was never as secret as Penthouse acclaimed. The OTRAG agreement with Zaire, which was never as secret as Penthouse claimed, has rightly caused uproar. The terms are reminiscent of the deal made by Cecil Rhodes with King Lobengula. The size of territory, 100,000 square kilometers, was allegedly determined for launch safety precautions and is in a thinly populated part of Shaba province. It suddenly struck me that Hussein's Department of War Studies affiliation might have biased his prose. First, it occurred to me that an area that included 76,000 African natives might be calling something other than thinly populated. Then it seemed odd that Shaba province the center of covert CIA military operations in the region, might be determined the safest launch site. The area was as close to a war zone as one could get without being in the middle of it. Hussein continued, OTRAG has use of this area of Zaire rent-free until the firm becomes profitable. After that, the Zaire government receives 25 million Zaires annually and retrospectively from 1976, paid into any bank designated by President Mobutu Sese Seko. But this is not inflation-proof, and Zaire's inflation is currently running at about 70%. OTRAG promises to launch a Zaire military reconnaissance satellite for free, although it doesn't say when. Zaire does have the option of the first satellite launch, but it loses all the rent due up to that point unless it pays for the launch in foreign exchange. This is made easier by providing Zaire launch facilities at a 20% discount. Zaire cannot withdraw from its contract with OTRAG until the year 2000, but OTRAG can withdraw at any time. By 1981, OTRAG intends to begin operating at around 101 launches per year. Hussein went on to deride OTRAG for having little hope of attracting customers. The value of reconnaissance satellites for third world countries is extremely doubtful, he claimed, because the data received requires experienced technicians and large computer facilities to interpret. NATO's yellow press? Either Hussein wasn't keeping up with realities in his area of special studies, or was he moved to produce disinformation for NATO? I realized OTRAG's project seemed to fit the Western Allies' need exactly. During my research, I had stumbled on a North Atlantic Assembly report by Christian Rumter, head of studies at the University of Paris. Rumter reviewed NATO's space and upper atmospheric objectives. He noted that cooperation between Germany and the United States was discussed first in 1960 and again in 1969 on the basis of a study by the Economic Committee, which, after having recognized the exploration of outer space as one of the common goals which can help relieve world tensions, regretted that the current national space programs are duplicative and extremely costly. Duplicative. This clearly raises the problem of the relations in this field between the United States and some European countries. In 1971, the NATO Assembly, see civil and military structure in Figure 20.2, commandeers in Figure 20.3. Let's just show it to you. Now, let's see if I can find my spot. Here we go. Recommended that alliance member countries continue to undertake European action in the space field in view of the creation of a single European space body. Continue to develop and perfection of launchers capable of placing in orbit satellites weighing more than 600 kilograms, and which would guarantee European independence in the telecommunications field by harnessing the scientific and industrial efforts of European industry. Continue to improve space cooperation in the INTELSAT programs, and though technical and commercial agreements at the bilateral or multilateral level, especially in the post-Apollo program, and regarding meteorological questions intending to be unanswered, and regarding meteorological questions intended to be answered through satellite technology, as in the case of ERTS. What does that mean? ERTS. Earth Resources Technology Satellite. Okay. Earth Resources Technology Satellite. And regarding meteorological questions intended to be answered through satellite technology, as in the case of Earth... Damn, I forgot it already. Son of a bitch. I'm just going to keep going. In 1962, NATO's program of space research for peaceful purposes recommended that a long-range weather forecast system established by NATO, and the Assembly also requested that, in accordance with NATO's policy of good neighbor relations, information be made available to the neighboring friendly nations, and not only in Europe but also in Africa. So, in 1975, when USAID called for NASA to develop these systems and Zaire was chosen as the central site for satellite launching and data collection, NATO's program had been on the drawing board for over a decade, and OTRAG's program evolved virtually simultaneously with NATO's. This knowledge, combined with the fact that OTRAG's space program served all the needs articulated by Kissinger's State Department, made me think that Hussein and not Zolk was purposely spreading disinformation. Additional evidence for this conclusion came from U.S. Representative W. Tapley Bennett, Jr., who stood before the UN General Assembly on October 18, 1976. The congressman then defined OTRAG's market and indirectly linked OTRAG to German-American efforts to develop space programs for USAID, NASA, and NATO, he noted. The year 1976 has been an active and successful year both in outer space and in the UN Committee of the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. During the past year, the United States has continued to participate cooperatively with other nations in the exploration of outer space. We have, for example, launched Helios 2, built by the Federal Republic of Germany, the second scientific satellite to investigate the properties of interplanetary space close to the Sun. In January, we launched the CTS Communications Technology Satellite, an experimental high-powered communications satellite developed jointly with Canada. Oh, here's figure 20.3. You're going to want to pause this and read what you want. I'll read the bottom part for you. The military structure and command centers of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO is governed by the North Atlantic Council, composed of representatives from members' nations. Its scientific committee, the Science Committee, is responsible for overseeing the development and deployment of chemical weapons. NATO allegedly does not use biological weapons. Allegedly. However, while OTRAG was setting up a missile base in southeastern Zaire, NATO forces were being summoned into action in the same area, Shaba region, by President Carter. Source: Department of State Bulletin, July 1978, page 1 through 12. In cooperation with the Agency for International Development, USAID, using the ATS-6 satellite, Application Technology Satellite, NASA is currently conducting demonstrations of the applications of space-age technology for the benefit of developing countries. These demonstrations will be seen in 27 countries in Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. And regarding the Zaire project, Bennett said, this year the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee has again noted that the Landsat system continues to provide the international community with data and experience in the new field of remote sensing by satellite. The Economic Commission of Africa has just endorsed a comprehensive training and station development program for Africa, and the European Space Agency has formulated a plan for rationalizing Landsat data acquisition and use in Europe. Zaire will be acquiring data on a regional basis. The fact is, the Helios 2 project that Bennett alleged was built by the Federal Republic of Germany was actually developed by the OTRAG-linked Messerschmitt Bolkow-Bohlem company from Munich. According to Messerschmitt literature, their company built Helios A and B, the German-American solar probes. In summary, OTRAG has arrived at the right place at the right time to succeed financially and in every other way in serving NATO's interests. The evidence showed that United States Assistant for International Development maintained connections to NASA and NATO, and all three had acted on Kissinger's behest in Zaire at the time OTRAG leased a sizable share of the country. Run by ex-Nazi Debus, who had directed Cape Kennedy, Gormpeds, who presided over NASA's Chrysler Space Division, OTRAG's founder Lutz Kaiser, whose ties to NASA and NATO leaders on both sides of the Atlantic and connections to America's top military, industrial firms were both evident and unsettling. Moreover, this knowledge fueled my suspicion that OTRAG was related to Littleton Bionetics in a way Belitsky had not mentioned. Kaiser, as an Apollo space program consultant with, like Kissinger, ties to Boeing, may have purchased military hardware from Littleton Industries as he had from Boeing. Being a major military contractor, it seemed logical that Littleton Industries might have supplied satellite technology along with reagents for biological weapons research to OTRAG. Given OTRAG's link to Messerschmitt, I thought, which after World War II had contributed greatly to the fund administered by Martin Bormann, Hitler's deputy and Third Reich Party chief, Kaiser was likely part of the Kremenwerk and possibly even a member of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. Skip 2 pages. In either case, he was undoubtedly among the 900 or so Nazi scientists drafted by the Army intelligence under Project Paperclip. Later, I discussed these findings with Jackie. Could OTRAG have been a NATO or CIA front, she asked. I decided to search for the answers. Major covert connections. I began my search for additional evidence connecting the CIA to OTRAG by reviewing what I knew about the latter. Kaiser had leased 29,000 square miles of eastern Zaire to do any kind of military experiments. Anything they wanted with the territory. 760,000 African villagers called home. Next, I considered the place and time. 1975, at the height of the CIA's paramilitary operations in the exact region, OTRAG, I realized, could have served as a front for several covert CIA and NATO operations, including military and satellite surveillance over MPLA forces in Angola. Tactical nuclear weapons buildup, scientific efforts to help Gallo and his Littleton Bionetics colleagues develop and test the immune-altering viruses ordered by Kissinger through the Department of Defense for MK Naomi, helping Hilleman at Merck and Maneker at the National Cancer Institute develop and test experimental cancer vaccines for populations at high risk for viral infections, bringing new technology to Zaire as the Western Allies promised, and enhancing NATO and NASA communication systems through the development of ERTS. So many acronyms just being thrown around. I can only remember so much. ERTS. And it's not even listed in the acronyms. Damn. Now to find my spot. Shit. Oh, here we go. During the next U of I library incursion, I learned that a year before Debus left his directorship of Cape Canaveral to head OTRAG's experimental military base in Zaire, Horst Eimk, the Minister of the Federal Republic of Germany for Research and Technology, paid the United States a visit. A joint statement issued simultaneously in Washington and Bonn noted that from March 2nd to 8th, 1974, IMP had met with American officials to discuss common interests in the programs and plans of both countries in science and technology research and development. Among the notables were the Honorable Roy L. Ashe, Director, Office of Management and Budget and Littleton Industries Incorporated President, the Honorable Edward M. Kennedy, U.S. Senator and then NATO Vice President, the Honorable William J. Casey, Undersecretary of State for Economic Affairs and future CIA Director, the Honorable H. Guyford Stever, Director, National Science Foundation, and Honorable James C. Fletcher, Administrator, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. The Honorable Helmut Sonnenfeld, Counselor of the Department of State and Kissinger's National Security Council appointee. EMP, the release said, also visited the gaseous diffusion enrichment facility at Oak Ridge and the research and development facilities of the Oak Ridge National Laboratories, the site of numerous horrific chemical weapons experiments, cancer virus research studies, the related international conferences. Here, besides traditional fields of cooperation in nuclear energy development and in space research and technology, the German-American contingent considered other areas particularly appropriate for joint investments. Biomedical research and technology was among the most pressing. Obviously then, Roy Ashe had lobbied for Littleton firms to play a major role in the German-American exchange. So Littleton Bionetics was likely an industrial intermediary in the OTRAG Nazi connection. This made perfect sense. Kissinger was Ashe's alternate for the National Security Council directorship following the service to General Bolling and Rockefeller. The former directed Project Paperclip to take advantage of the Nazis' most advanced aerospace and biological weapons developers. Rockefeller's bank received much of the Nazi war chest, so it made sense Debus and company might be called upon to take charge of Kissinger's most urgent Third World exercise. You can't create a new order with the old Germans, with Hitler and all that, argued Klaus Barbie's colleague Alfredo Mingola in 1982, the fanatical Nazi and admitted CIA agent assigned to infiltrate Reverend Moon's Unification Church added, "You have to find something modern. Viral weapons and Star Wars certainly fit the bill." Nazi researchers, I realized, were perfect for OTRAG's assignment. Besides their brilliance in chemical engineering, aerospace, and germ warfare, they established the field of serial epidemiology. They examined all human blood types to determine varying susceptibilities to different diseases. The purpose was, of course, to develop a superhuman race, freedom from the mundane illnesses that attacked those of lesser purity. OTRAG's assignment to develop monkey viruses that were capable of such rapid replication that they could completely destabilize the human immune system, as Belitsky charged, seemed perfectly suited for Nazi research. I also realized that the Marburg and Ebola fast-acting viruses did just that. I tried to fathom the relationship between Gallo's work and OTRAG's based on Belitsky's report, recalling that before 1969, only American organizations stockpiled simian monkey virus reagents. For later distribution, I knew the World Health Organization's reference center Damn, I fucked that one up, didn't I? Recalling that before 1969, only American organizations stockpiled simian monkey virus reagents for later distribution, I knew the World Health Organization's reference center in San Antonio, the National Health Institute, and the National Cancer Institute were the original monkey virus suppliers for those qualified to study them. So most likely, I realized in the early 1970s, OTRAG would have needed to get their simian virus testing reagents, their antibodies, cell lines, and other standard viral research requirements from an American source, most likely from Gallo or some other National Cancer Institute source. I thought, not only because he was their top gun in retrovirology, but also because he was heavily funded by the Department of Defense through Littleton Bionetics. Indeed, Belitsky's report made the most sense. With it came the realization that Gallo's Biological Weapons Consortium, Littleton Bionetics, and the National Cancer Institute, Merck, and the New York University Medical Center would have most probably desired a laboratory operating in a remote area of Central Africa where monkeys were plentiful and populations were expendable. I already knew they maintained laboratories in Central Africa, and upon realizing Gallo's group or Bionetics would have needed to supply OTRAG's researchers with essential experimental reagents, I reckoned maybe OTRAG was a subcontractor for Gallo or Littleton, and if lucky, I'd find a paper trail here as well. If all really does seem to fit, I said to Jackie, and the evening before we left for our road trip to Florida. Will you be going back to the library again tomorrow? Yeah, just for a few hours. I need to see if I can find more information about the one organization I know least about, Littleton Bionetics. Littleton Industries Incorporated in Bionetics. Early the next morning, I began my investigation of Littleton Bionetics in the corporate microfiche files of the library. Having reread Belitsky's broadcast along with the Information List Südliches Africa report several times, I realized, based on Secret Service sources, OTRAG was an extension of West Germany's arms companies, Dornier and Messerschmitt. So while I was searching the reference literature on Littleton, looking for ties to OTRAG, I decided to investigate these other companies as well to see if their operations paralleled OTRAG's or Littleton's. Direct evidence, I realized, given that OTRAG was to have remained top secret, would probably be classified and therefore unavailable in the reference literature. My Littleton Industries search was quickly rewarded. Within a few hours, I held several annual reports the corporation had filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The information included financial statements and moderately detailed corporate operations reports for the years 1976 through 78, the period during which OTRAG was receiving the most media attention. I immediately learned that Littleton Industries Incorporated, a Delaware corporation with its central office in Roy Ash's hometown of Beverly Hills, California, was highly diversified. Incorporated first in 1953 under the name Electrodynamics Corporation. A year later, its name changed to Littleton Industries Incorporated. The company, their 1978 report stated, ranks as a major industrial corporation, serving worldwide markets for commercial, consumer, industrial, and defense-related products. It produces or provides a wide variety of highly competitive projects and services which are classified into 6 major business segments. These included, in order of their percentage, of $3,653,209,000 in total 1978 sales. 25% business systems and equipment, 20% electronic and electrical products, 17% industrial systems and services, 16% marine engineering and production, 14% advanced electronic systems, and 8% paper and printing publishing. As fiscal year 1979 began, the company employed over 90,000 people, 25% of them outside the United States, principally in West Germany, Canada, France, Italy, and the United Kingdom. Yet despite its apparent success, the company recorded a net loss that year of $90.8 million or $2.66 per share, including a $172.9 million after-tax loss from a settlement agreement with the Navy. In terms of the West German connections, Triumph Alder, Littleton West Germany subsidiary, the report noted, was responsible for a major increase in corporate earnings. In anticipation of future market growth, Triumph and Alder acquired D.M.D Data Systems of West Germany in April, expanding its business and technological base in several fields, including multi-station mini-computers for administrative, technical, scientific, and medical applications. Littleton, Germany's subsidiary Hellige, in particular, was hailed for having achieved its 5th consecutive year of outstanding performance as sales of its electronic medical systems grew by more than 15%. Other relevant parts of their 1976 through 78 reports included: in June 1976, Littleton Bionetics won the 4th renewal of its contract to manage the operations of the National Cancer Institute's Frederick, Maryland Cancer Research Center. More than 750 scientists and support personnel are engaged in intensive basic and applied research for FCRC on the causes, diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of human cancer. Holy smoke, I broke the silence of the library. The revelation that Bionetics managed and operated the entire FCRC for the National Cancer Institute stunned me. Let's see if FCRC's in here. It better be. Frederick Research Cancer. Okay, it's Fort Detrick. Frederick Cancer Research, FCRC. Frederick Cancer Research Center. Yeah. Now I could just find my place. Okay, here we go. A major thrust in immunologic control of cancer at the FCRC recognizes that cancer is not autonomous in its development and growth, and that natural host mechanisms exist. Research approaches have developed new insights into the cell types involved in tumor destruction, as well as the mechanisms of tumor recognition and killing on the cellular and subcellular levels. The program's scientists believed this work could lead to practical immunotherapeutic approaches to cancer. Littleton Bionetics further expanded its activities in the rapidly growing U.S. and European markets for biosafety testing. The new business came from commercial and industrial firms moving to comply with the new U.S. Toxic Substance Control Act, which will soon require the testing of 70,000 industrial chemicals already on the market, as well as 1,000 or so new ones introduced each year to keep cancer and mutation-causing agents out of the environment. The division's in vitro assay primarily involved Ames-type testing procedures, which where a specialty bred strain of bacteria is exposed to test chemicals in a culture dish. This bacterial mutates at a very rapid rate, making it possible to identify potential carcinogens and mutagens at a relatively inexpensive cost in most cases. Earlier in the year 1978, Bionetics was awarded a 5-year renewal of its contract to manage and operate the Frederick, Maryland Cancer Research Center for the National Cancer Institute, and also began marketing the first product it has developed for clinical testing laboratories, a new test for infectious mononucleosis, emphasis added. Infectious mono, I recalled from my pathology training, was caused by the Epstein-Barr virus, which is also associated with Burkitt's lymphoma and nasopharyngeal carcinoma. All three diseases, along with Epstein-Barr virus, were exactly what Gallo's senior Dr. Maneker at the National Cancer Institute and several other researchers were avidly studying in Central West Africa during the early 1970s, I recalled. I quickly looked up infectious mononucleosis in a medical reference book. Indeed, the infection was most commonly found in that part of Africa. A survey in Ghana, Africa, found a seroconversion. A survey in Ghana, Africa, found a seroconversion rate of 85% by age 2. Burkitt's lymphoma also occurs predominantly in Africa, and the text noted, and virtually all African children with BL. Bovine lymphoma? Let's find out. BL. Burkitt's lymphoma. It was right here. Burkitt's lymphoma also occurs predominantly in Africa. The text noted, and virtually all African children with Burkitt's lymphoma have very high titers to Epstein-Barr virus. Nasopharyngeal carcinoma occurs frequently in southern China and northern Africa. Again, there are high titers of antibodies to Epstein-Barr virus almost universally, and their genome is found in the tumor cells. Bionetics was operating in Bethesda and Africa at the same time OTRAG was there? There's got to be more proof. I considered that almost a decade after Maneker and others at the National Cancer Institute and Merck received federal funding to study Epstein-Barr virus and Burkitt's lymphoma and nasopharyngeal cancer, Littleton Bionetics was marketing a test kit based on their research. This was the third time I discovered that taxpayer-supported National Cancer Institute grants had funded pharmaceutical developments from which private concerns were now capitalizing. It seemed most plausible that the same had been done with the AIDS test. To confirm my suspicions, I placed a call to Frederick Cancer Research Center from a nearby phone booth. I was told by an administrator that Littleton Bionetics Research Lab had been involved in the development of AIDS test and that it had sold the product to a private concern. Soon thereafter, Littleton also sold Bionetics Research Labs to MedPath, among the largest medical laboratories in the United States. Littleton Bionetics, I was also informed, was still involved in administering funds for the National Cancer Institute. It now seemed even more plausible that Littleton Bionetics, having managed Fort Detrick's major cancer virus research for so many years, might have managed OTRAG's mutant virus program and the CIA's Project MK Naomi as well. More West German aerospace business. Besides Trump Adler and Deal Data Systems, Littleton SEC report noted other connections to West German companies in the aerospace industry. Littleton Advanced Electronic Systems Division billed itself as the world's leading supplier of aircraft internal navigation systems, INS, internal navigation systems, and a major producer of U.S. cruise missile guidance hardware. In 1977, the company had outfitted West Germany's Alpha close air support jets with Doppler radar navigation systems. The acknowledged LITEF I don't know what that means. The Freiburg, West Germany-based military contractor for having increased its business volume by more than 20%. The purchase was pursuant a combat aircraft guidance system that a consortium of British, German, and Italian companies were building. for various customers. The then division disclosed its sales to NATO of missile guidance and satellite reconnaissance technology, data systems, and other Littleton Industries subdivision, the report said, gained major follow-on business on its NATO Integrated Command System, telegraphic automatic relay equipment, contracts NICS and TARE. What? NATO, okay, the N stands for NATO Integrated Command System, and TARE is Telegraphic Automatic Relay Equipment, which calls for the integration of computers, teletypes, video displayers, and other peripheral units into a communications network linking NATO members in Europe and North America. Deliveries begin in calendar 1979, and the system becomes operational in the 1980s, when current processing methods will be unable to keep up with the projected number of transmissions. In addition, the company boasted sales to Americom, which began production on a major contract for airborne systems that senses sources of enemy ground-based radiation, determines the signal's direction, and locates potential anti-aircraft artillery or missile threats. Designated Tactical Electronic Reconnaissance, it will be the first operational tactical reconnaissance system deployed in quantity by the U.S. Air Force. Such technology, I realized, would have served OTRAG's needs exactly. Realizing that tactical reconnaissance was exactly what Kissinger had urged CIA forces in Zaire to deploy against the NPLA in Angola, recognizing that aerial surveillance was what United States Assistant for International Development had requested from NASA to help with the agriculture and water management in Central Africa, knowing that the Federal Republic of Germany was a partner in Skylab, wherein one of Skylab's most significant payload components was its Earth Resource Experiment Package, a complement to ERTS. ERTS-1, Earth Resources Technology Satellite. Okay. Launched in 1972, the State Department acknowledged that plans for similar stations are underway in Africa, and knowing that the United States and Germany were reducing NATO costs by coordinating their military and scientific programs to reduce duplication of efforts, it seemed most plausible that Littleton divisions had supplied OTRAG with a mix of aerospace hardware, software, and germ warfare products needed to carry out the multiple military missions Kissinger defined as urgently needed in Central Africa. My next step was to research back issues of the Wall Street Journal and Aviation Week. I thought for sure Littleton would have announced these large business dealings and perhaps provided additional intelligence. Littleton Industries in the news. Knowing that OTRAG had been developing its prototype launch vehicles that piqued NASA's interest in 1976 and was likely to be in full swing by 1980, I directed my Wall Street Journal search to this period. Indeed, I found the Wall Street Journal had announced virtually all of these transactions between Littleton Industries and its West German customers and affiliates. Among the first entries I came on was one that shared a $32.9 million Air Force contract for electronic reconnaissance and sensor equipment. This order, I realized, may have supplied the military equipment needed for USAID and NATO's satellite reconnaissance effort developing at the exact same time in Zaire. Then a couple months later, the Wall Street Journal announced NATO's purchase of $11.3 million of computerized communication systems from Littleton Data Systems, a group intimately connected with the Littleton division that included their West German Helig company and Littleton Bionetics. I also learned that this $11.3 million NATO contract had followed a much larger $40 million award for a communication system to supplement a NATO computerized SATCOM system, a requisition most likely designed for Zaire because of the unique nature and timing for the purchase. Undoubtedly, then, a mass of circumstantial evidence indicated that the Littleton organization was in the satellite reconnaissance business and linked to OTRAG through its West German Helig division, Littleton Bionetics, as well as NATO purchasing. Moreover, just as I had suspected, the satellite reconnaissance system administered by USAID and NASA for allegedly humanitarian and agricultural purposes had actually been designed, purchased, and directed by NATO officials. I photocopied all the incriminating evidence in haste, not wanting to hit the road too late, and then returned to the motorhome to share my findings with Jackie. Since Littleton Bionetics was subcontracting for the Special Operations Division of the Army and the CIA during Kissinger's Project MK Naomi, the allegations that OTRAG was subcontracting for the Pentagon were apparently accurate. The results of their biological weapons development program then could have easily been tested on the same region of Zaire that OTRAG operated, I explained. So you think they intentionally released the new viruses in Zaire, she asked. Well, it's certain the deliberate release in that region could have served, besides the population control, 3 CIA Kissinger-directed programs, I replied. The Covert Military Operation Feature Project MK Naomi and COINTELPRO. Isaacson was right, I concluded, as we headed south. Kissinger was devilishly brilliant. He is. A twisted web. Later that week, I digested the articles I had photocopied. I'd learned that Tad Solk's allegation that OTRAG was an extension of West Germany's arms companies Dornier and Messerschmitt was apparently accurate. Besides testimony by an unnamed CIA official who stated that the Boeing company had provided OTRAG with cruise missile technology, my search of Aviation Week revealed a number of confirming details. The first fact, Boeing owned a 12% share of Messerschmitt Bolko, which it sold to Siemens Corporation in July 1978. Moreover, besides being engaged in all facets of the aerospace industry, both Messerschmitt and Dornier maintained medical research and technology subsidiaries, making OTRAG a suitable acquisition, if not secret military affiliate. Also, during the period that I searched the financial and aerospace literature, the West German-based Teledyne Corporation purchased increasing amounts of Littleton Industries stock, so that by 1978 it owned 27% of the company. Meanwhile, another German-owned company, Grumman Aerospace, was Littleton's fiercest competitor for American defense contracts and had worked for Teledyne's chief subcontractor building navigational computers and data processing systems. Apparently, heavily in Littleton Industries, which Grumman had battled to secure the $1 billion NATO radar reconnaissance workup for bid in 1977. All this underscored, for me, the twisted web of NATO's dealings with the allied German-American military medical industrial complex. Almost done, folks. Fraudulent claims. In my search for Littleton Industries announcements in the Wall Street Journal, I ran across numerous articles in 1978 that focused on the company's criminal activities. One such article detailed a Supreme Court's decision to have the company reimburse the Navy for hundreds of millions of dollars in fraudulent charges. On Tuesday, October 3, 1978, a Washington correspondent explained, Littleton Systems Incorporated, a subsidiary of Littleton Industries Incorporated, lost its Supreme Court bid for dismissal of an indictment charging Littleton with filing a fraudulent claim on a Navy submarine project. The indictment of Littleton stemmed from a $30 million claim filed against the Navy in 1972 by Littleton Ingalls Nuclear Shipbuilding Division. Then, in a second court action, Littleton agreed to settle a dispute that required congressional committee review, the staff reporter wrote. The Navy and Littleton Industries Incorporated settled a $1.9 billion shipbuilding contract claim dispute with an agreement that saddles Littleton with a $200 million loss and the Navy with $447 million in additional payments. The settlement, which must be reviewed by Congress, resolves a 9-year dispute between the company and the Navy over a contract to build 5 amphibious assault ships called LHAs. Loss for fiscal year. Charles Thornton, Littleton's chairman, said the settlement will result in a substantial loss for the current fiscal year, in which record earnings had been expected previously. In the 9 months ended April 30th, Littleton earned $53.8 million on sales of $2.7 billion, almost equal to the $55.9 million it earned on the sales of $3.4 billion in fiscal year 1977. He said the company will take a pre-tax loss of $333 million this year, which works out to an after-tax loss of $174 million. The loss is composed of the $200 million called for in the settlement, plus $133 million startup cost at the Pascagoula Mist Shipyard of Littleton Ingalls Shipbuilding Division. Beside this dispute over the LHA program, the agreement also covers contracts for 30 DD-963 class destroyers the company is building for the Navy at Pascagoula. The estimated costs of these contracts at completion is $4.73 billion. Under the settlement, Littleton waives all claims against the Navy under the LHA contract signed in 1969, the destroyer contract signed in 1970. Littleton will also withdraw 2 suits filed against the Navy under the LHA contract and pending in the Federal Court of Claims. I instantly realized that the period in which the contested contracts were signed between 1969 and 70 was just after Nixon gave Kissinger the National Security Council directorship he had been considering for Littleton's presidency, Roy Ashe. Instead, I recalled Roy Ashe was given the chairmanship of the President's Advisory Council on Executive Organizations. His title, Assistant to the President of the United States, and his company, Littleton Industries Incorporated, was then awarded well over $5 billion in military contracts, along with the privilege of developing AIDS-like viruses for the New World Order. Long-winded day, guys. That's it for today. We'll pick up on this tomorrow.